Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Bags, the podcast for below average golfers by two below average golfers. My name is Owen Smith, as always, joined by Caleb Wallen. And Caleb, we have a special guest tonight. It is
Yep,
not Ben Hogan's son, but it is the one, the only Scott Hogan. Scott, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be on.
Absolutely. I had to throw it out there. That's your Twitter handle, not Ben Hogan's son. Have
Yep.
you actually been accused of being Ben Hogan's son in the past and you had to clarify?
Uh yeah, I think, I started golf when I was like 7, 8, and like all these old guys at the course, like the Rangers and stuff, would always ask me, like, you any relation to Ben? And I've been asked so many times in my life. And as back then I had no idea who he was. I was like, just like, no. And so now it's just continued. So yeah, so that's where it came from.
Perfect.
yeah. I get
What?
the I get the question of am I related to Morgan Wallen? So
Yeah. Yeah, you know how it goes. And then you're like,
yeah,
I wish. If I
yeah.
was, I
Like
probably
I
wouldn't be here.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be hoping that he'd give me some help or
Yeah.
some extra Christmas
Uh,
money.
yeah, I can help him out. I can do something for him. I'll
Yeah.
help him some way. So
Awesome. We were talking before the podcast. I discovered you through your YouTube channel. I was on kind of the journey of trying to find something to use throughout the winter and practice my game. And Garmin R10 was something that was right up my alley, just based on budget and kind of the capabilities that I was looking for. I'm a below average golfer, hence the name of the podcast. So I don't need the all the kind of tools and things starting out. At least I don't think I do. Maybe by the end of this, you'll be like, "Owen, you're wrong. You actually should be tracking this."
yeah.
But so I discovered you through kind of looking through that. Got the Garmin R10. If you don't know what it is, it's a launch monitor simulator. About $600. So really reasonable compared to some of the other options. And I discovered you throughout that process. You have a lot of YouTube content. Talk to us a little bit, kind of your background and kind of where you got started going into the YouTube and just your overall career.
Yeah. So I'm a PGA professional. I teach full time. That's what I do. So I'm up in the Chicago area at a course called Stony Creek, which is actually in a suburb called Oak Lawn, but right on the south side of Chicago. So it's a good area, a lot of good golf. And my career, I started as somebody that worked at a golf course, as an assistant pro, kind of started teaching a little bit there. It just was kind of a golfer, and you knew how to play. I took to like the golf swing and stuff like that, but I never really knew what I wanted to do. I just knew I liked golf a lot, and like I love golf, and I was like, man, I don't know what else I would do outside of this. And so I got into it, started teaching a little bit, and then I ended up going to Arizona, which is where I went to college before that. But I went out there and worked for a couple of years and got hooked up with Mike Malaska, who's a big instructor. And he was kind of the first guy. I was there for 3 years. I'd intended only go for the winter and come back and work here. But I met him. I was like, hey, I need to really like understand what this whole teaching thing is about and how to make a career out of it. So he was great. He was the first instructor I had met because he has a big background in baseball, and he talked about other sports and stuff that it all just made sense to me. I was like, all right, that actually is what I feel, and that makes sense to me as an athlete and all that. So started learning from him after 3 years, kind of felt like, all right, I want to go give this a go. So I moved back into the Chicago area, started my business, and started doing that. And so then with that, kind of with what's going on with how golf is going, YouTube and online content is such a big deal now. I mean, it's just unavoidable. I know there's kind of a thing with golf instructors and golf instruction is like, oh, you don't go to YouTube for tips or anything like that. But to me, it's like, hey, everybody's going there anyway. So my thought was, hey, can I just give really good, solid information, and not be, my goal is not to be too, hey, I've got to be on the fad of do this or do that. It's like, hey, this is just what literally works. Like when I teach people in person, that's the information I try to share as well. And then, as stuff started coming out with launch monitors and stuff, I grew when I was in like high school. simulators were starting to come around, but they were very expensive. I did go play in like a league. I remember our town had some. We would play there, but they were just a hit. They weren't very good at all. But then you would start doing like, all right, hey, all these launch monitors are coming out, and it's like I had my first launch monitor was a FlightScope X2, which is like, at the time it was like 10 grand, I think. But, as we've been going, it's like, man, it's just getting less expensive. It's cheaper, and they're getting just as good, as those really, really expensive ones. So it's like, all right, we're going to start getting those things. So I obviously have a lot of that stuff. I have a Garmin, I have all those things. To me, it then became obvious that, hey, everybody's going to be having this stuff to practice with, which is great, but are you going to get the most out of it, or how do you get the most out of it? And so I thought that was a good opportunity. Like, hey, let's talk about what this is going to be, because it's not necessarily a magic, you can buy it. It's a great investment, but it's not going to be like, hey, you just hand over the credit card and then boom, you've dropped 10 strokes. You got to know what to do with it. They are very, very helpful, but what are you going to do with it to make that happen? So that's kind of where I've kind of gone with it. And, I have some other things I like to do as far as playing and seeing other golf courses, but that's pretty much the main stuff that I like to do and, help people understand.
Yeah. The content from teaching professionals like yourself get, I think, a lot of people into it early on. Like I've learned so much from that. I have still to this day have not been to an actual lesson. Now that's changing really soon. But I think that there's, especially watching, your content and a lot of the content that's out there, there's a lot that you provide that helps out. So first off, thank you. But second, like, I think it's a great thing, because there's a lot of people, especially probably our audience and people that consider themselves below average golfers, that are a little hesitant or scared or, intimidated maybe to go to a professional. But if you ease them into it with some tips and tricks that are on YouTube, it's super helpful, and a lot that you can learn from that.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing I've tried to show. Like last year, I did a series I called it Chasing Scratch. Not after I didn't even know the podcast existed, but I guess that already does. But it's the whole point was to show like, hey, that this is a journey, right? Like we all get better, we all get worse, we all, if we don't practice, you're not going to be that good, or you can't expect to get better if you're not actually working on things and you don't have goals. You don't, hey, I want to get better at hitting short irons. Okay, well, you need to actually set that goal and know, like, hey, how are you going to know that you got better at it, so you can actually feel comfortable? So we have that conversation a lot in in-person lessons, but again, I think that's just kind of been a gap in the online. I mean, not even in the online, just in the instruction idea. I think that this is going to be a process. It's going to be, that's part of the fun to me, is the process. I mean, I don't like to hit terrible shots all the time, but it's, when you have, it's like, oh, I feel it though. I feel it's getting better, stuff like that. So you always feel like, hey, I can make myself improve, but just know that you're not like the only one that's struggling with it or anything, as you're going through it.
I feel like for me, my dad will tell me all the time, like, hey, like my washer's broke. I hopped on YouTube to, try to fix it. Like, I feel like that kind of online instruction, it bridges the gap between like the people that are intimidated to go in person, or like they're not willing to say like, hey, like I'm going to take lessons, and they're like scared to admit that they need help, which, we all need it. So especially out on the course. So I think it makes it a lot easier when it's like kind of like what Owen said, where you get your tips and tricks first, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should dive in more.
Well, and the personality of your instructor matters a lot too, right? You have to mesh with that. And I know I've had students that I've not necessarily meshed with, where, their expectation of something is this, and that's not really what I do. And so, or I just don't see it that way, so we're not on the same page, and that's fine. There is somebody else that would be better for them. Or, again, as you're going in, you kind of see like, hey, this, I've had many, because I do a lot of work with high school kids too, is, they'll tell me after that they've been with me for a few years, like, yeah, I was very nervous, very scared going in. My dad was making me do it, whatever. And then, they're like, yeah, but you were very approachable, whatever. So, that's important to me as well. And it's, again, I think the biggest thing that people see when they're trying to come for a lesson, they think, oh man, I don't want to embarrass myself, or I don't want to, this or that. It's like, well, that shouldn't be your thought at all. It's, hey, you're going there for help. I don't want you coming in. If you have an issue, when you go play, I want you coming in with that issue, right? Like, let's fix that issue. I don't, I'm not like, oh man, I'm not looking at a student coming in and saying, I hope they're pure in the ball because I just want to sit here and not do anything, right? Like,
right.
It's, I know you're coming in and you got an issue and you got something that you need help with. The biggest thing you got to come in with is an open mind, is say, all right, I'm going to get challenged. I'm going to have to do things that are, I always tell people, if I don't make you feel uncomfortable or different, I'm not doing my job. Like, if I were to have you, if you throw right-handed and I had you pick up a ball and try to throw it lefty, that's going to not be very good. Same thing when you're trying to do a golf swing. So, don't worry about all of that. That's how it's supposed to go. And then hopefully my job as well is to hopefully get it to happen as fast as you can, where it feels as good as possible. But you know what, that's where practice comes from. And that's why you're going to go and work on stuff as well when you leave it. So,
yeah, the other note too, like you said, on kind of the personality thing, I think the thing I like about the online community and the online aspect of it is the fact that, had, let's say, YouTube wasn't around or social media wasn't around, I would have never discovered you and I would have never heard your tips and tricks. I would only be limited to the people in my 20-30 minute radius, because that would be what I'd be willing to travel to. But now I'm exposed to, you're in Chicago or Illinois area, and if I wanted to, I could definitely head that way because I've been exposed to your content and know your style and kind of your personality with everything, which is why I love that. And it kind of leads me to my next question. From starting the YouTube channel and going through that as a teaching professional, have you seen kind of an uptick in person because of that, or maybe not direct results quite yet?
Yes. Well, just, I would say more of an uptick in like people like yourself. Like, I've had people come from like St. Louis, or they come from a couple hours away, and I don't see them regularly per se, but I will see them occasionally. And so, hey, we'll give you a plan, get you going. Because again, I think what you realize is, like, once you get that plan, you can go work on it for a while. It doesn't have to be, hey, I got to see you next week to be able to do this. It's like, if we're being realistic, I mean, I know that there's some businesses out there that will do that. I mean, they're trying to drive for some money and all that. But, when I was watching the tournament this week, Justin Thomas was watching Jordan Spieth swing on the range, and Jordan was talking. He's like, man, I've been trying to do this for 2 years, and something with his takeaway. And it's like, yeah, that's how it goes. It can take a while. And the way that with the internet now too, it's like, I do check up with a lot of people now. I teach more online than I ever had in the past, so I check up with that. I mean, you talked about, you can get the instruction from who you want to. I take lessons personally as well on my own game, and I've never actually met my instructors. I have one for putting and I have one that's helped me with my full swing. I've never met them in person. So, it's like, that's kind of the way of the world now. They've 100% helped me. It's just, we can use this technology to our advantage. So you don't have to kind of settle with where you're at per se. You can just take a look, again, find the information you want, and then, or see who you think has good information. Then usually you can get connected with them no matter where you're at. So that's kind of the exciting, cool part. And then, with the online community, it gets shared. It gets shared throughout the community. Like, hey, this guy's good, this guy's not, all that. So, you can get a good grasp of who you're going to.
For sure. Do you provide private instruction through kind of online as well? How does that work?
Yeah. So right now, the way we do it is just basically, especially in season, we do checkups, just on swings, things like that. In the off season, we always are going to do more work. I'm not one of my things is you should do most of your work in the off season. I know we're going to talk about that, but it's a lot of times right now it's like, hey, let's look at your rounds. Let's look at what you're doing. Are you capitalizing on what you can already do from a technical standpoint? I think most players, they technically are actually probably a lot better than they think they are. Some aren't, but a lot of times they're not getting the most out of that. So, if somebody says, hey, I want to be able to break 90, a lot of times they actually have the ability already. They just don't know how to do it necessarily, as far as like strategy. Where should you aim? What do you expect from yourself? Now, again, that's not 100% true, but so we're working a lot on that right now. So a lot of people are sending in cards, we're sending in rounds, stuff like that. And we're taking a look at them. But then from there, when we get into the winter, it's a lot of swings. It's like, all right, hey, we're going to look at this. I use an app called Sportsbox AI, which is kind of a newer world of 3D where you can actually, with the video, all you need is a video. We used to do this with a bunch of sensors and stuff on the body. Now you can just do it with a video, where you actually send it in and we can take a look and say, all right, hey, your body could move better with this. So again, those are things I like in the winter to be able to work on, because, making body changes can take some time, but there's a lot of ways you can do it. I've done Zoom as well. Hey, live on the range. Let's go have you on the range, set your phone up. Let's watch you practice a little bit. I mean, there's a multitude of ways you can do it. It's just what I like is it actually gives you that a little bit of freedom to do that with just some of the coaching apps and things that are out there. And, we don't have to fall necessarily into that, hey, it's line up for 60 minutes on the range, watch you hit some balls, tweak this, you're gone. And who's next? It doesn't have to be that. We could actually kind of coach you a little bit and, actually make you shoot lower scores, which to me, that's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely is the goal. And
so
I've had a realization over past month or so where, I was expecting something and I was always expecting to improve, but wasn't necessarily putting in the work to do that. And then was not liking the result. And kind of led me to this conversation and investing in my game and talking about the off season. Before we get to that, if someone is interested in private instruction online, how do they do that? I know you have a website, but what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, just scotthogangolf.com, or you can contact me on Instagram, it's the real SHG, or YouTube, leave a comment. All those, I check them regularly. So anyway, you want to get it, and then we can go from there and start up a conversation, kind of see if it's what you're trying to do. I try to get as much info as possible, and then we'll see if it works, because the last thing I want is somebody to come in and say, oh, I'm going to do this, and they don't get it. So want to make sure it's actually something we can attain via the online space, but that would be the best way to do it.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's make the transition over to it. We're based in Indiana here. You're based in Illinois. So we know what is coming up very, very soon. Although we're still in the summer months, the golf season starts to really dwindle. And especially as the daylight goes away for people like myself and Caleb, who work 9 to 5s and aren't able to be on the golf course as much, the off season really starts even sooner than that in some regards. Right. So like I said, I found you through kind of looking through, different devices and things that you can use at home. But I guess I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about what should an off season look like. I know there's not a cookie cutter answer because everybody's game is different, but when you're in a state like Indiana or just across the Midwest where you don't have year-round golf and you're kind of limited on facilities in some regard too, what should that look like, and what's your suggestions there?
So the first thing is it's actually kind of nice to be, as somebody that lives somewhere that was year round, it'll sound crazy, but it actually is kind of nice to have an off season where you're like, hey, this is going to be my dedicated time to improve. Right. And so we're not worried about, all right, I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then you go out that next round and it's like, because what's very likely to happen is it's not there yet. And it might not be your best score. That's sometimes we have to make that commitment that like, all right, it's going to take me there's a whole process of going from doing it in practice. First off, you just got to learn how to do it. Then you go to, hey, I can actually pull it off in practice. Then you go to the course, and then that starts a whole other thing. So it's nice when you have the off season just to say, all right, I am going to be working on my swing, whatever, and I'm going to just do this. So you could just really commit to that. Now, I would say the off season to me starts pretty much now, because as we're playing, what I always tell people is, as we get to September, maybe October, what you want to start doing is kind of taking stock of what your game looks like, right? So play as much as you can, because we don't have that much of it. Try to go out there and just take some notes of like, hey, this is what I struggle with. And that's where it can be a little bit different depending on who you are. But, if you're somebody, like myself, I use stats, so I keep stats of my rounds. Hey, I've got my short irons, I'm losing strokes there, doing that, whatever. Or you can make it as simple as like, hey, how many times are you hitting the ball solid? If you're somebody that is starting off pretty, down in like, hey, I shoot 90s, 100s, somewhere in there, that's the first thing that I would kind of pay attention to is like, all right, do I hit the ball in the center of the face? How many times am I doing that? Are there situations where I'm not doing that? Are there specific situations? And I would kind of take that into account because, we go back to what we talked about at the start. The biggest thing you have to do when you're improving is you have to know you got better, because, I hear this talked about a lot too, is confidence, right? Oh, I wish I was a more confident player. And unfortunately, we can't fake that, right? You got to be confident by hitting good shots, but everybody says, oh, I don't hit good shots because I'm not confident. So it's a weird little situation we get into. And so we have to kind of help ourselves out by saying, all right, I used to do this, now I can do this, right? And that's making me better. So even if it's in the practice environment. So I would say, all right, as we're getting into the off season, we're going to first take stock, then we can go ahead and take a look at the game and say, all right, you know what, you really kind of struggle from this range, whether it's driver, wedges, short game, irons, all that. And then you put together the plan. Now, the first thing I would tackle is any type of swing changes where maybe you have to move differently, your body has to move differently, anything like that, because those are going to take the longest. And so again, and those usually can lead to some pretty interesting shots, we'll say. So it's like, hey, I might top it. I know when I took a lesson, I wish I had this video still. I took a lesson a few years ago and I got help, and I literally whiffed the ball, but it was like at that moment, I was like, that's the swing. I was like, it was light bulb moment for me. I was like, that was the swing. And the next swing was the best one I hit. Like that is normal to happen, right? Like you will hit weird things because you're just kind of learning it. But so you can do that in the off season again, when you're not using your time out on the course, all that stuff. You can take enough time to do it. Then you go from there. And then as we get, back closer to the season, then you start saying, all right, my swing looks different. I'm doing this. I can hit it better, whatever. Then as we get closer to the season, then you have to start shifting to like, all right, my swing's better. I can hit it better, but do I know what to do with it? So then you got to start building your skills, which is, all right, for example, all right, I can hit a 9-iron really solid, but how far do you hit it? So you got to start learning your distances. You got to start learning how to, maybe you want to learn, hey, I need to hit a draw or a fade all the time. That's my shot, right? You start learning those types of things as you go. And then hopefully that'll take you into the season, where we hope to get to the point where when you get to the season, you're really just working on short game, because it's hard to do that inside a ton. You can do it for sure, but as far as hitting off grass and judging lies and hills and all that stuff, that's obviously not going to be easy to do. But we're hoping to get to that point. So if I was doing a winter, first thing is take stock in your game, decide what you want to improve on. Then let's look at your swing, make sure you got your technical stuff, get that going, because it's going to take a while. Then as you get closer, usually for us, it's around, February, March, maybe April. Then it's like, all right, do you know, now that you have this new swing, do you know how to use it? So you're going to need to know how your yardage is. You're going to need to know, how high you hit it, all that stuff. So, then you start using that and really get comfortable with that. So that would be kind of how I would lay it out.
So the one thing that stood out to me is, so I started putting together this practice plan, and one of the biggest things actually was the short game. Now, clearly we're still technically in season, and for some reason I thought with putting mats and I guess being able to chip, I just assumed that short game would be the easier thing to work on, but it sounds like coming from that, you think that's something that's more that needs to be managed during season, and the off season should be more of the bigger changes, focusing on the swing, figuring out kind of the other side of it.
It could be. You can definitely do it. I have a putting mat as well. I love it. I think you can do that. The things that you're going to work on, though, are going to be, let's say, for putting. And I have, basically the Short Game Gains is a company, right, that they have short game equipment. You can get a mirror from them, and you can get it from other places too. But like, I have a putting mirror, and then they have these start gates that you can use. So I'm literally working on getting set up, rolling the ball straight ahead, so it's a gate, hey, I'm going to roll the ball and get it started online. And, there's definitely some merit to that. The thing you got, and so that's going to help you on like shorter putts, and definitely helps you know, hey, I can roll the ball straight ahead, right? Which is important in putting. Now, the biggest issue though you're going to have is just reading greens, right? So 100% can do it, and work on, again, you can work on your putting technique, you can work on a lot of stuff, but you just got to remember when you go out, it's like, all right, I still got to remember to work on the green reading part and all of that. Same thing that would go with chipping. I do think there's some merit to chipping. Like, I know, Caleb, we were talking earlier, if we have some issues with contact, and if you're catching it on the inside or outside the club, those things can definitely be worked on in the off season, where it's like, hey, I feel like I can do it. But the big thing I think is there's just no substitute for, hey, I'm on grass. And this is true for everything, to be honest, like full swing. I was playing the other day, and I hit my 9-iron, for me, it's like 145. The other day I hit it from 157 and hit it pin high. It's like, how do I know that happens? I have no idea. It just, at that moment, I felt it. I was like, I think this one's going to get there. I just had this feeling. And it's like, so there's nothing that we can say, and that's not a flex or anything. There's a lot of people that hit it more distance than me, but it's just, we have these feelings that you got to remember that when you go play. So what the biggest thing I like about the indoor stuff is, I love that we can kind of get over all the other stuff that you have to be able to do, like learn how to hit a chip solidly, learn how to putt and roll it straight ahead, get set up, do all of those things. Because when when it does come time to play, that there is going to be a lot of focus and a lot of concentration, or you should be, on that type of stuff. Like, all right, if I've got to hit a chip, where do I want to land it? How's it going to roll out? How's it sitting in the grass? Is it going to come out a little bit dead, or is it going to come out a little hotter? Stuff like that you get through a lot of experience, and you guys got to be concentrating on it and focusing on it. So when you see it again, you know what's going to happen. You kind of recognize it and say, all right, this is what I'm looking at. The same thing with putting, reading greens, and then, like I said, full swing. It's like, all right, today it's hotter, this wind or whatever. I just, things are going to happen, and we got to just kind of recognize it. So definitely can work on all of it. Not trying to say that you can't, but you just got to know what parts you're accomplishing.
Yeah.
And then when you get back outside, all right, make sure you fill in the gaps of everything that helps you hit good shots when you play on the golf course.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think the one thing for me is with green readings, I feel like I have a good handle on the reading of the green, but I struggle a lot with with pace. I'm a foot short, I'm 2 feet long or whatever, and I don't know, I've always kind of I felt it easier for me to try to read like more of the break and kind of just let it trickle, as far as, okay, like I need to bridge the gap between the pace and the break, and then just kind of give it a little extra, because that's when I hit it 3 feet past the hole, 4 feet past the hole. So is there
Right.
like a specific drill that I could do to like, I don't know, marry that pace with that break?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things that you say there. One, the first thing I always try to get people to do is get a lot better at 3 and 4 footers. So you're not worried about those as much, right? So
Yeah.
that would be the first thing, right? So you can, again, you can go back indoors and you can work on that. So, if you want to improve your pace, if you're a little less tentative, you're going to tend to be a little bit more in control of it. But from there, I mean, a couple of drills you can do, one would be, I like your idea that you're adding a little bit more break. Most people underread and then try to hammer it. So that's not usually what you're want to do. But the biggest things that you can do is, and you can do this inside, you can do this, you just need a space, is basically you can just dial in your speed control. Like if I set up, let's say you have 10 feet of room, or let's say you even have, let's give you a little more, 15 feet of room. Okay. So you hit it you're 7 feet out, you put like a marker, like a T or something, just something that is the beginning of your zone. Then you go to the end of your room and you put another thing, or you just use the edge of your wall. And all I would do is try to hit putts and try to go, hey, this one's going to be right at the front edge of that. Then I'm going to go right past it, then right past it. And you basically see how many you can fit into that zone and see what you got. The other thing you can do is you could actually, you could just have a single area and try to see how many balls you can fit into that box. Like if you said like, hey, I'm going to make a box or some sort of shape, like I'm going to try to put balls into that area, try to fit as many as you can in there. You can do that. There are good putting tools out there too. I have what's called an X putt. You can do that where you can actually hit putts up to, I think it goes up to like 80 feet. So it's actually a putting simulator. That's pretty cool
Oh yeah.
too. But
I feel like I've seen those.
yeah, it's actually really cool. I just got the new one last winter. They actually have like, they're starting to put courses in there so you can actually play 9 holes of putting on your course or whatever.
Nice.
So it's actually pretty sweet. It actually does a really good job with that. But again, that's an investment. If you're not looking to do that, there's a lot of ways you can work on just touch control, and go from there. I also I had a similar issue at the start of the year. For me, it was like I was leaving everything a foot short. So I use a product called Slope Grade. Again, just something and most of the stuff you see me talk about, I just look for it and I'm like, all right, I'm going to buy it. And this is actually some charts. It's basically like if you have to know how fast your greens are, but I've been using it for 4 tournament rounds now, and every one of them I've been positive strokes gained putting, which I've just had a better feel for speed. All it does is tell you like how at this speed, at this distance, and this uphill or downhill, the ball has to roll this fast in the first second of the putt. So then all I work on is that, and it actually works really well. That might be a little overkill for some people, I know, but it's helped me. So, but
so for
yeah,
those drills that you mentioned where you're just picking a target in your room, like my house, I have I don't want to call it a shag carpet, but it's fairly close. Like, would that translate then to like I would hammer it out on the course, or is it just kind of like a drill where
because I think it's more
in?
about I think it's more about just the idea of like feeling what it takes to put more or less into a putt, right?
Gotcha.
And this can even go with anything that you do. And I know we were talking Garmin and all that, but the biggest thing with all of these devices and all of that is I think it's given such a good opportunity. Like I love the Garmin. It gives you information so you can actually like, all right, I just hooked it. Why did that happen? Right? Or I'm hitting a putt. Why am I hitting it too hard, or why I'm hitting it too soft? Like, what am I doing to add or subtract speed to it? I mean, all of these things, and that's the biggest thing in the winter is you want to try to understand, I think too many people are looking for that one tip, and I try to stay away from those, like with my YouTube and stuff, but because I just don't believe in it. But that one tip, like if you do this, you're good forever. It doesn't exist. And so what it really comes down to is, and what you see players doing on TV and all that, is they're really learning and comprehending what they're doing, because that way they're ready for whatever situation is going to come their way. Because, you might play at a course all the time, but what happens if it rains a bunch, and they didn't get to cut the greens? Well, you got to adjust on the fly. All right, how am I going to add some pace? I normally would do this, but how would I add some pace? Or how would I take off some pace? Stuff like that. Hey, I've got to hit a slice around a tree. How am I going to do that? Okay, as I'm working with my launch monitor, that's giving me some insight. When I swing like this, that makes the ball do this, and it also will tell you why. I think that's always a big missing component for people when they're trying to get better. They tend to think, all right, if I don't know, make one up, if I tend to do this with my right arm on the way down, that's the key. Well, why? What did that do to make that better for you? That's going to be important, because feels change. We all adjust. Things start to feel normal. So when something might feel different to you at first, well, it's going to start feeling normal. So then you got to kind of just be aware of that and be like, all right, that's where the launch monitor is great, because once stuff starts feeling normal, you can still look at it and say, like, hey, I don't feel as weird as I did before. And you can still say, hey, I'm still doing it. I'm still doing whatever feel I need, because my numbers on the launch monitor, or whatever drill you have set up, they are matching up still. And that's key. That's what helps you realize, hey, I'm getting it.
Perfect. So we've talked a lot about these products. We've mentioned the Garmin a lot. I know you've also reviewed a ton of stuff on your channel, the Mevo, with the flight scope. Yeah. So what's your suggestions going into the off season for people that are looking to invest in their game and start tracking some of that information and work on it to get a better understanding? What are some of your suggestions that can also be found on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I mean, I biggest one I use is the Mevo Plus. Garmin's great. I mean, there's always tiers in investment, right? Like, hey, the more you spend, obviously, you're probably going to get something that's a little bit better. But the big question you have to ask yourself is, based on, so if you start like Garmin, or, Garmin's a great one because it'll actually show you a lot of data at that like $500 to $700 range. Whereas, there's some other ones that just all it'll give you is like ball carry, essentially. It gives you a few other things, but essentially that's all you're getting. And so you start going up and you have to look at it and say, all right, well, now the next level is kind of like, there's SkyTrack at 2,000, and then there's 3,000. And what are you getting for more that you really need? And so again, I think, and then it goes all the way up to the 25,000 range. I get that a lot, and where people say, hey, this 3,000 one is not as good as the $25,000 one. It's like, well, no kidding. That's not going to be the case.
Right.
That's not realistic. But I'll tell you what, if it's within a couple of yards, I'm willing to sacrifice that for sure.
Yeah.
But the big thing is, again, I think you have to look at it and say, all right, when you're tracking things, what is kind of your system going to be like? All right, how do you want to judge what your game is? Okay, you need to play golf this way. Okay, so first things first is define what your score goal is, and say, all right, this is where I want to get to. So again, for most people, it's like, hey, I want to get to 90. If that's your goal, well, what does a 90 round look like? And so you need to do that. I've actually done a few videos with the Barstool guys. Trent, he's trying to break 90, because that was the whole point of that. Is like, I just think a lot of people don't realize what 90 golf looks like. Like, if you're hitting greens and stuff, that's way beyond 90s golf. Like, you are doing really well. You really just need to make sure you're making solid contact. You need to make sure you're not having penalty strokes, like hitting the ball super offline unexpectedly. And then short game, hey, I can make really solid chips that get in the air. I don't blade them. I don't chunk them. And then short putts are big. And then you probably would have to leave the long putts to the season. But all of those things that we talked about, you can work on those things. So you start off by just tracking your game and saying, all right, how often do I actually do these things? And then from there, you go and you set up your plan, and you go into the winter and you say, all right, so I'm going to need something to hit into. I'm going to need, I think a device is helpful. There are some kind of cheater ways you can do it without a device, with just some old school tricks with, if like, let's say you want to make contact, I think we all kind of know you can get like face tape and stuff like that to see where you're hitting it and all that. But it is nice to see a ball fly and stuff like that. That's a big deal. But, you get your device, you say, all right, hey, I need to work on hitting the ball more solid. So the number one thing I would look at is smash factor for that, because that judges how fast the ball is going relative to your club speed. So that's essentially how centered you hit it. So I want to make sure that is where it should be, and I want to make sure it's consistent. So I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work every time I go practice. I'm going to work on that, get that dialed in, make sure I'm hitting that number. I don't want to hit it too high, because that's actually bad too. That means you're probably blading it, or you're going to unexpectedly hit it too far. And I don't want to hit it too low, because that means I'm not hitting it good. So you want to set that goal. And then from there, you go and say, all right, I'm going to do this. Now that we're getting into it, then we can move on to the next thing if you get really good at it. But, you just set that goal first, so you know what you're actually going to do, and then you actually can go do it. Otherwise, you're just kind of hunting in the dark, and hopefully something hits, and it's not very often that it does.
Yeah, this is just a new mindset for me, and just a new year for me. I'm only 6 years into playing golf, and last year Caleb and I played in a simulator league, but we were playing in a league. We were just having fun. It was something to do during the week. We weren't getting it, but I wasn't paying attention to the data. We were just going there to play St. Andrews on a simulator. And now I've set goals at the beginning of the season, but I think it's almost like set the goals before, now for next year, and work towards it throughout that. And I've never done that before. And so that's why having this conversation with you and starting to realize that about my own golf game is life-changing in a way, because I've never done it before. And I haven't excelled to where I want to be, and it's because I haven't put in the work to get to that. And finally realizing that is super helpful, and this conversation's been helpful as well.
We all have to do it. I'm doing a new series for my tournament season. I'm playing more tournaments this year, and I had to, same thing. It's like, all right, instead of just showing up and playing and hoping I play good like once a year, like I did last few years, it's like, all right, I'm going to actually play a bunch. Let's actually like say like, hey, you actually need to do this and get better. And so it's amazing when you do that. Like I said at the beginning, I was like, hey, my putting wasn't good. Well, then once you get dialed in and you realize that, then you actually get focused and you work on finding solutions, and then you actually can do them. And then you'll be amazed at how much better you get quickly. And golf gets pretty fun pretty quick, I think. So
for sure does. Well, thank you again for joining us. I would love to have you back on, especially as we get through maybe halfway through the off season. And I want to hear about, again, I've a new fan of your content, so I'd love to hear how your new series is going with all that, and keeping up with everything, because you have a pretty good indoor setup as well from what I've seen. With all that, so
lucky with that. So
for sure.
Thanks guys for having me. I would love to be back.
Absolutely. And any last things? I know we said Scott Hogan Golf, not Ben Hogan's son on Twitter. What else do you want to plug?
Just the real SHG on Instagram if you want to check out. Just do some traveling around the courses and stuff if you like looking at that stuff. But feel free to reach out to anybody, and we'll always love talking to people and helping them out. So
awesome. Well, thank you again. And
thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you guys.